Okay, it's 10:40, everyone, so welcome back. We'll kick off the second part of proceedings today to make sure we stay on track and, welcome Joachim Flickinger, who's head of clinical and patient markets at KOL Publishers in Switzerland, and Iola Gulyev, who's a strategic competence lead for industry and society services, also from KOL and based in Switzerland. So, Joachim, Iola, over to you.
Thank you very much for the short introduction, and thank you to the attendees for joining this very short session. Yola gave me the honors to talk, so I will be happy to do so and guide you through this presentation, which is about KOL engagement from a medical publisher's viewpoint. Generally, I have to say at the start that I will not only be talking for KOL publishers, because I think what I will say goes for many, if not the most, publishers, of course. But I would say through our strategy, our approach is rather unique. And of course, I will give you some examples of work that we do at KOL because it's easiest. So what am I going to talk about in the next few minutes? I'll give you a very, very short intro to KOL publishers. We'll then talk about where to find or where we find KOLs and what different types of KOLs we see in our daily work. I will talk about the right KOL for the needed information to fill certain knowledge gaps, how we tie loose ends together when it comes to KOLs, how we keep these KOLs engaged, and how we support the engagement and interaction between KOLs and other stakeholders of the healthcare ecosystem. So first, a few words about KOL. We've been around as a medical publisher for over 130 years now. Our mission is, speaking for itself, connecting and advancing health sciences, which of course includes the interaction with KOLs, which is more or less our bread and butter in publishing. We're an independent family-run in fourth generation. Our headquarters is in Basel, Switzerland, but we have offices all across the globe. You see a few product covers here just to illustrate to you what we do. We publish scientific journals. We publish journals for HCPs. There is book publications around, of course, as well for researchers, HCPs, but also for patients. And just to underline, I mean, this is 21st century. Of course, we publish in all possible formats you could think of, and we are quite well into app developing as well. You can see two here. The first one is a screenshot of an educational course, actually, which is based on content that was published in a book series. And the second one is a dermatology app, which helps dermatologists with differential diagnosis. So let's get into a bit of strategy we have at KOL. I have to mention that 2 years ago, we implemented a new strategy and a completely new organization at KOL Publishers. Before that, I would say we were very much into research publishing, and after that, we diversified into the HCP and patients' content or information part more heavily than before. And what you see on your screen right now is what we call the cycle of knowledge from our point of view, and of course regarding health sciences. Right in the center of this, you see a tiny circle which you can barely see and not read what is written there. This was our old publishing cycle, as we called it, which covered the steps from manuscript submission to publication dissemination. So this is still the core or part of the core of what we do, of course, but the cycle of knowledge is much bigger, and we elaborated this during this strategy session, facing, well, the development of health sciences per se, the development and the change in the healthcare ecosystem as well. And you can see different steps here, which starts at the research query, goes via the research, the actual research, the project, study design, funding steps, the experiments and clinical trials, which generates a lot of data, which is extremely interesting for us as a healthcare publisher. the analysis of this data and the possibilities you have to analyze this data, preprints as preliminary results to speed up communication in the research sector, the actual publication as we know it in articles, for example, in journals or in book chapters or whatever you have. And then, of course, the dissemination, reception, discussion of said research content. And this would be the point where a rather new area at Karga comes in, which is represented by my unit, Clinical and Patient Markets, where we take the step of knowledge transfer to transfer this research information and outcomes to the clinical or practitioner level, where another step of commercialization also happens, of course, and then another step of knowledge transfer to the general audience, or especially patients and caregivers. And the perfect circle would be perfect if from the patient level, data, information, and knowledge went back into research. And this is a step which we have started now covering by introducing new formats and new ways of working with authors and editors who are all, or many of them, actually KOLs. And here you can see that at many of these different steps of the cycle of knowledge, you will find different types of KOLs. You find different types of KOLs when it comes to research. Talking about the actual clinical trials, you have different types of experts and KOLs. The same goes for the analysis of data and the implementation of methods and the development of methods, for example. When it comes to publishing, you have great KOLs who are experts in their medical field, of course, but have a huge experience in publishing and publishing strategies, of course. And when we cross the border, so to say, to the HCP area, we find a completely different type of KOLs there. And going to the patient area, we have POLs, so to say, patient opinion leaders, patient organizations, and that sort of people getting involved, which represent different types as well. So you can imagine that from a publisher's view, we have to do with all different kinds of experts, of KOLs. Not all experts are KOLs, but in their field they are. And for us, it is very important, and this is also something I like to remind partners, for example, from industry, when we are starting to develop content together, that we should think a bit about who are the right KOLs for the task you want them to fulfill in a collaboration. And that brings me to my next slide, actually, which is the knowledge gap. If you see the need to communicate something and come up with a communication plan, it might be in scientific communications or medical communications, it doesn't really matter. You have to fill a knowledge gap, and you have to ask yourself, what is the problem or the subject you want to address? What is the target audience? And what exactly is the knowledge gap? And then choose the right KOLs. This is nothing new to you, but also think about combining these to write or create the right content you need to disseminate then and communicate your findings or your news, actually, which come from research. Again, you have these images here, which represent different formats and link to that different types of KOLs. You will have different KOLs when you publish research papers. Then you have them when you publish case reports for books for HCPs, for example, or material in general for HCPs. You have different KOLs there, and of course, going to patients, and you see an image from a patient tear-off, which is information material for the moment of diagnosis and communication between doctor and patient, you have another set, so to say, of KOLs who will be best to be engaged with for this reason. For KOLs, we've seen also that it is very good to bring together people from different communities, and this could be a lot, actually. I mean, here we've written that it could be interesting in many cases to combine KOLs in writing content, for example, from different nations, and that is very true. You get a better balanced image about the same issue. It depends, of course, very much on the subject you want to communicate about or to publish about. If you can even find these people, just as in Tom's talk before, we heard that in rare diseases, you might not have KOLs all over the world. There might only be a handful of KOLs around the globe. So it's not really a pick and choose, but in other areas which cover more common diseases and entities. For example, you will have the possibility to come up with a KOL team, for example, of people based in North America, Asia, Europe, and creating something together with, which of course creates value and for the KOLs, but also for the ones commissioning the content and using that content to communicate later on. Another thing is going away from the international approach would be interdisciplinarity, for example, so to say, mixed teams of KOLs from different viewpoints on the same subject. Depending on what you want to communicate and what you want to reach with your communication as well, it might make sense to think about what type of KOL you really want. Do you want a very experienced one, a matured one? Do you need the diva type of KOL, which is known everywhere but very hard to get? Do you rather want to support rising stars? Do you need digitally inclined KOLs, because it is very important for what you're trying to get across in content and information. So there is a lot of things to think about. And this is just findings we had that we are now using actually. And why, or how did this come? I mean, if you have a look at our KOL network, we have over 200 editors-in-chief, over 4,500 editorial board members. There is over 7,000 peer reviewers, and of course, this huge number of submissions of almost 20,000 article submissions per year, where we get in contact with all sorts of experts that are authors. And if you multiply the 6 or almost 7,000 published papers per year by the number of authors each article has, which can vary between, I would say, 5 and 10 or 20 sometimes, there is really a lot of people we know about their expertise. And it is quite normal for a publisher to go back into contact with these people, and they will normally be happy to get engaged with new projects as well. So I would say we have a quite deep fountain of knowledge and expertise there, which we can work with. So bringing together these different stakeholders of the healthcare ecosystem really can make a difference here. As said before, crossing that bridge from research to HCP information alone adds a lot of value and closes a lot of gaps. There is a lot of information around in the research area of publishing, and which is not accessible necessarily to HCPs, let alone to patients. So bringing together KOLs from these different points can make a difference, because they will work out the crucial points between each other, and through us as a medical publisher or any other medical publisher, actually, it's easy to identify these people and get them together. By doing so, as I just said, you also find the rising stars, you find the digitally inclined ones, which you can also support because you give them visibility in their sector, in their area of research, which is also a nice thing to do, of course. And by combining different types of KOLs, you always have a winning situation as well, I would say, for the party that actually orders or asks to have the content written, which can be and very often is industry actually. Of course, there's a lot of new possibilities or newer possibilities to build these relationships in these highly digital times. It's very easy to get people together, no matter where they are, through different formats as well, and also make things more interactive. I mean, in the older days, it was written text, which was then printed, and then it was still written text, which was digital. Now we have video, audio, e-learning. So you turn content into courses, you make it interactive. You can CME accredit content, for example, and it's worthwhile using that content for the reader as well. And this is another point. How we do this? How do we create this visibility? Through distribution, of course. There's a lot of visitors of our different websites, of course. We are going more and more into the open access sector, which means we are taking the paywall out more and more, which is usual for the scientific publishing community. We work a lot with affiliated society partners. Most of our journals actually are affiliated to multinational or international societies, and we can use that as well. And if you think about a big society like the EFAD, for example, which is the European Federation of Nutritionists and Dietitians, which have 30,000 members, and if we engage with KOLs from them on behalf of a nutrition company, for example, or a pharma company, we have an immense reach right from the start, which is of course perfect for all parties. Social media, of course, is important. We have experts in-house who cover this and who are always happy to get the most out of it, also together with our partners. And I think this is standard, but worthwhile mentioning it because the development of good social media plans is difficult enough for one party, but if you have a partner who really sees another area of where you're working in, this can help a lot and increase your impact of whatever you're publishing or communicating. So I'm already at the conclusion. This was really a short view on this subject. And the question is, why do I tell you this? You could, of course, choose to do all the work yourself. A little number of companies actually think about medical publishers in that way, speaking of searching KOLs and thinking about how to get different kinds of KOLs to work together, actually, at least from our experience, it was like that. And it's pretty much a moment of enlightenment or something when we come up with a concept, and doing so, working together with a medical publisher will just open a large number of potential contacts, and in the research area or also the area of practitioners to you, which is easy to use because we have really easy access to these people and get them quite enthusiastic about stepping into new projects and to develop them together with 3 or 4 partners even, which we then also can handle like a project manager, for example. So this is just a slide to, well, the obligatory one showing you some partners. We're a member of the STM publishing organization. Our content regularly wins BMA awards. It's the British Medical Association. You see partners from the industry, which we already have worked with. This is just a short list of the last projects we realized actually during the last 1.5 years. And some of the the associations I just mentioned earlier. And you can find different types of associations here, of course, as well. It's medical associations, it's patient organizations, they're government or NGOs. So really a wide variety where we can again find and address KOLs in our daily work. So this is basically it. Here you have my contact and also Yola's, the website and everything. And I think I would be open for questions for the next 10 minutes, if I see that right.
Excellent. Thanks, Joachim. Very interesting overview. We do have a question online on the chat. Why don't we start with that one? And it's, how is KARGA encouraging KOL authors to participate in the new digital channel offerings like video, abstracts, infographics? Often many authors are not interested in these add-ons to publication.
Okay. Actually, so we have two very different types of experiences here. I can remember it was like 2 years ago, or maybe even 3 years ago, I had a colleague from editorial development. So that's the guys who develop our journals, asking our graphic department if we could do infographics. So that was a start, and infographics are quite easy, format or content-wise. And it was really new and it freaked us out a bit. And then we did one and it circulated. And since then, the requests really have increased like crazy, I would say. So on our end, the experience would rather be that we don't have to even motivate people. Video is maybe a different thing. It depends very much on the personality. And there I'm really going towards KOLs. You have people who really like to be in front of the camera and give interviews or do informational parts, which could be part of an educational course that we produce or something like that. And of course, you also have people who are not so comfortable with it. I think an argument that they cannot deny, whoever they are, is that engaging with these, well, in quotation mark, new technologies or new ways will give them a broader reach. And if they're not interested in that because of their ego, so to say, and sorry for my bluntness, they will be or might be because they all have an interest in distributing the findings from their research. And there's really different levels. But what I find important is that these partners with whom you publish as authors, the KOLs, are really taken by the hand. And if you make them feel comfortable and address their fears, so because sometimes it's really just normal concerns they have, they should be fine. So I think there is not a magic recipe, but the visibility is a good argument. Also that news travel faster if they come in video, for example, or visual, in a visual format. So this is what we've seen. But generally, people are actively asking us to do it, even before we can ask them.
Very good. And if I can just sort of build off that question and off your answer, do you see an opportunity or a change here in practice where the primary vehicle or channel for communicating results isn't going to be your traditional scientific paper, you know, whether it be in print or in a PDF or you're scrolling online, but the primary method is dissemination through some kind of video or some graphical interface? Be interested in your thoughts.
To be honest, I guess it is a matter of time until things change, but we have to really make a difference answering that question between research and information for other reasons, like information for practitioners, like guidelines or patient information, for example. The thing with research is that it is still common, if not, it's obligatory to publish in a certain way. If you do research, you need to publish your findings in a research journal. The best thing would be that it's a research journal with a high impact factor. So you cannot free yourself really from that corset, if you will, because you still have to follow these lines if you want to make sure that you get certain metrics fulfilled in the end, which help your career as well, and which secure you funding for your research. So this is it's a quite difficult environment, I guess. But there is criticism also from researcher side towards these very old habits, because they are very old, and times are changing. And I mean, you could have a discussion of 4 or 5 hours about if impact factor even makes sense because of what it measures and so on and so forth. So I guess there will be changes, but it will take quite some time. But in other areas, it is simple, especially talking about getting information across to HCPs and patients anyway, because if you talk about patients, I think the best way is something very visual, because you always, if you use text, you use simple language anyway. But also in research, I think, and that's what we see, and that's what I meant when I said people are actively asking us for infographics and whatnot. There is a whole small universe coming up, which is something like additional material around the actual research article. And what we also see is that people, when they hand in their manuscript and it gets accepted after peer review, they immediately show interest in some visuals. So even at a moment where the article itself with the full information and sometimes even the link to the data and stuff is not yet published, they want to communicate fast, and many people have recognized that communicating more visually or audiovisually is much more effective and will generate much more interest in a very short time. So I guess it will change in research as well. But I don't dare to. I don't know if it will be 5 years or 10 years, but you see things moving there. Yeah.
Excellent. I don't see any more questions on chat, but so I do have another one for you. We have still a few minutes left, but sure. You mentioned that opinion leader network that you've built, and just looking back to the previous discussion with Liz and Trishna, do you involve any patient opinion leaders as part of that network? And kind of as a corollary to that, do you look to also publish findings or studies in a kind of more patient-friendly or health-literate way?
Yes. So the department I'm responsible for, which is called Patient Resources, is actually the youngest one and the smallest one still. But the plans we have, and I'll start with that last bit of the question, is actually really doing this. So what we are aiming for is to transfer knowledge from research to the patient level. It can be with a step in between via the HCP level, but it doesn't have to be. So we are actually looking into starting a patient blog. We're in planning phase for that. I guess we'll be launching that beginning of next year, where we will do exactly that. We will take the newest knowledge from research regarding, well, we have to start with a smaller number of subject areas, of course, or diseases, because there's not so many people in the team, and then engage medical writers, for example, but also create a lot of visual material to bring scientific findings directly to the patient, because there's a huge need and a huge lack. As we all know, and I think the situation is similar globally, there is not enough time very often for the doctor to sit down properly and talk to the patient about all the questions they have and explain in a very easy way what their disease is all about. You find that, of course, but this task is rather taken over by patient organizations. So this is really one of our goals. And the other question, if we engage with POLs, yes, we do. So this one cover you saw, we have this series, Fast Facts for Patients and Caregivers, where we create these small booklets about certain diseases, where we actually always work with patient organizations and have them co-author but at least endorse or check the usability of the content and the understandability as well. But in many cases, they co-author. We cannot, and I think we have the same difficulties as like pharma companies here, we cannot engage directly with patients as individuals, but patient organizations are a perfect way to do so. And in these formats, we do not only engage with patient organizations, but also, for example, with specialist nurses, because these are specialists that are in very much closer relationships with the patients than doctors oftentimes, because doctors have that immense lack of time to communicate and work with the patient, so to say.
Very good, very good. Thank you. We're right up on time. So again, thanks for a very clear presentation, and very much appreciate your insights and some of the future areas that you're looking into.
Okay, thank you.